traditional Dubrovnik Forum. Unlike last year, we brought Dubrovnik closer to you. First of all, with our brilliantly, magnificently built Pelješac Bridge and gracious entry into Schengen zone. And of course, also, you no longer have to go to exchange offices. Everything is done by paying in euros. It's a big achievement. All these achievements would not be possible with our dedication, hard work, tireless energy, and determination. It's my honor and privilege to deliver a few opening remarks at the beginning of this year's Dubrovnik Forum, titled Navigating in Global Reshuffle. Yesterday we had a chance to enjoy the gala dinner in the beautiful scenery between sun and sea. Gala dinner hosted by our Prime Minister. Thank you very much, Prime Minister, to host this in a gala dinner and for accepting patronage. Allow me just to summarize what lies ahead of us at today's conference. We have planned 5 engaging panels with the topics ranging from first, possible approaches to stabilizing world politics; second, Europe's energy transformation; third, strengthening the bonds in the Mediterranean; 4, a new Euro-Atlantic momentum for the Western Balkans; and EU's geopolitical weight and fluency in the language of power. Many thanks to our keynote speakers who are just about to take the floor at the setting panel. Speaker of the Croatian Parliament, Mr. Gorjan Jandrokovic; Prime Minister, Mr. Andrej Plenković; Secretary General of the Council of Europe, Madam Marija Pejčinović-Burić, my predecessor; Vice President of the Council of Ministers and Ministers of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Italy, caro amico, Mr. Antonio Tajani; and High Representative of the EU for Foreign and Security Policy and Vice President of the European Commission, Josep Borrell. Hola, Josep. So, welcome. As in the past years, the traditional Dubrovnik Forum opens to discuss the pressing issues on the global scene and to reaffirm our commitment to the principles of dialogue and cooperation in these times of the global reshuffle and brutal Russian aggression against Ukraine. I am sure and hope we will have a fruitful discussion, good networking, and a renewed sense of unity in light of the turbulent times ahead of us. But just before start the panel, we will have a video message from Mr. Matthias Cormann, Secretary General of the OECD, and Dmytro Kuleba, who is Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. Let us be guided by the ancient words described above. The former entrance to the mayor council hall in the rector's palace here in Dubrovnik. Obliti privatorum publica curate, as a constant reminder to prioritize the common good over personal interests. Thank you very much. I wish you a pleasant day. Enjoy.
Thank you, Minister Grlić Radman, for your opening speech. As an intro before setting the scene, we would like to present 2 short video addresses from our guests who unfortunately were not able to join us today. Ladies and gentlemen, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Mr. Dmytro Kuleba.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm grateful to the organizers of the Dubrovnik Forum for the invitation. I regret I cannot join you in person, but I'm glad to address you remotely. This forum provides an opportunity to produce knowledge, formulate policies, and seek the best path forward for Europe and the world. Indeed, we are at the watershed moment in European history. Our continent has not faced challenges of this magnitude since the Second World War. Today, we are creating a new security order in Europe, the one that will guarantee decades of peaceful and stable development for the Western Balkans, Ukraine, and Europe as a whole. The path to it lies through a decisive Ukrainian victory in this war. To those who doubt Ukraine's ability to achieve this, I can only say, you doubted every step of the way. In February 2022, you gave us 3 to 10 days. Nonetheless, I'm here in Kiev, although I wish I was in Dubrovnik with you. But seriously, more than half of the area that Russia had occupied is now free, and Ukraine is driving invaders away from its territory at all hours of the day and night. I will not persuade skeptics that Ukraine knows how to win. I would rather let them be surprised later, as has been the case so many times before. What I will focus on today is the larger strategy. NATO's Vilnius summit is rapidly approaching. You have probably heard Ukraine's repeated calls for allies to take a step toward our membership. We have been clear that we do not seek immediate accession, and we will not drag NATO into this war. What we seek is simply an invitation, a clear signal that Ukraine will join the alliance once the necessary conditions are met. And the reason we have been so steadfast in our calls is because we have a bigger picture in mind. We realize that only Ukraine's accession to the EU and NATO will result in a new European security order. Let us imagine what it might look like. Assume that after a long and bloody battle, Ukraine succeeds in breaching the Russian defenses and the Russian invading forces collapse. They are forced to flee large areas of occupied territory. In order to avoid a total military defeat, Putin decides to withdraw his troops from Ukraine. His propaganda machine then informs the audience that Russia's president made a wise decision to preserve Russian statehood. Taking advantage of the window of opportunity, Ukraine joins NATO and also the EU, along with Moldova and the countries of the Western Balkans. With its forces decimated in Ukraine, Russia can no longer maintain its occupation of other countries. Frozen conflicts in Moldova and Georgia are resolved, and both countries regain their territorial integrity. The deoccupation of Crimea restores peace to the Black Sea region. Ukraine's agricultural exports fully resume, bringing prices down and strengthening global food security. The recovery of Ukraine serves as a catalyst for European construction firms and other businesses, stimulating European economies. Ukraine's battle-hardened and professional army becomes a regional stability factor. As NATO member, Ukraine bears the burden of other allies. Ukrainian brigades, not German or American, are now stationed along NATO's entire eastern flank, from Finland and Baltic states to the Black Sea nations. They are strong, capable units that can repel any potential invader in hours, not days. They make it effectively unattractive for anyone to even think of testing Article 5. The new architecture will ensure long-term peace and stability through strong defense and deterrence, rather than appeasement. Europe will develop mutually beneficial and diverse economic ties with Asian, Arab, and African partners rather than deepening dependence on Russia. Energy independence from Russian fossil fuels will accelerate Europe's green transition. Extremist political forces across Europe will lose Russian funding, making it more difficult for them to gain popular support. With Russia's political weight reduced, UN Security Council reform will finally be underway. Russia will no longer abuse its veto power and poison the entire UN system by blocking critical decisions. Russia's influence will also dwindle in the OSCE and other international organizations, leading to reform and increased efficiency. The International Criminal Court and the Special Tribunal for the Crime of Aggression will provide justice for Russian crimes. This will also update international criminal law while discouraging any other evil force from abusing basic human principles. Europe and the world get a new solid moral foundation. These are not dreams. All of the above can become a reality if we act now, if we are not afraid to take bold steps rather than half measures. Fear is not and has never been a strategy. It is time to correct past mistakes, pursue our own European strategy, and act in our own best interests rather than simply reacting to others. All that is required is vision, tenacity, and courage. I'm confident we have it. So let's act. Thank you for your time. I wish you fruitful discussions. And I also thank Croatia for convening this important meeting.
and academia to foster dialogue on cooperative policy solutions to some of the evolving challenges and opportunities of our time. Discussions have focused on European integration at its first edition back in 2006, to energy security, the pandemic, the economic and social implications of Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, and many other issues in between. This year's theme of navigating the global reshuffle is clearly very timely and highly relevant. The rules-based international order and the rules-based global trading system, which have underpinned growth, development, and increases in living standards around the world for many decades, are under significant pressure. Our latest economic outlook shows the global economy has begun to recover, but it is a recovery to comparatively low global growth, with risks tilted toward the downside. The OECD estimates that global growth will reach 2.7% this year, the lowest of any year since the global financial crisis, except for 2020, the main year of the pandemic, or the first year of the pandemic, I should say. Inflation remains too high and is not coming down fast enough. There are the significant uncertainties related to the continuing war in Ukraine and geopolitical tensions more generally, as well as a range of long-standing and increasingly urgent structural challenges related to climate change, the accelerating digital transformation, and population aging. Governments must continue to do both: respond intelligently to short-term shocks and pressures, while making progress on longer-term structural reform needs with a view to optimize the strength and the quality of the economic development and growth, creating opportunities around the world, boosting productivity, including through reforms promoting competition, reviving investment, increasing female workforce participation, and alleviating supply constraints. Also, of course, securing the green and digital transformation of our economies and our societies, and ensuring well-functioning global markets based on a rules-based trading system in good working order. And indeed, tackling the economic and social challenges associated with population aging. The Dubrovnik Forum has an important role to play, helping policymakers to navigate these challenges while seizing all of the available opportunities. The OECD, as always, stands ready to help facilitate and contribute to these important conversations. In the context of some of the issues you will be discussing at this year's forum, we again commend our Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises Policy Index for the Western Balkans and Turkey, which we launched at this forum last year. That index allows policymakers to track progress in areas such as access to financing, regulatory barriers, ultimately helping to boost SME competitiveness, resilience, and their contribution to economic development and growth. This year, the OECD, together with the Dubrovnik Forum and the Croatian Foreign Ministry, held a side event on labour migration in Southeast Europe, focusing on how to make the most of this region's potential to achieve higher economic growth and to enable conditions that help reduce large-scale emigration. Beyond our participation in this forum, the OECD continues to strengthen our cooperation with Croatia. Croatia has begun its transformational journey towards OECD accession last year. This technical process, which is now well underway, will support Croatia's structural reform agenda by leveraging OECD standards, policies and best practices. And as importantly, the OECD will benefit from Croatia's increased involvement and engagement in all our policy deliberations across our many committees and working parties, and as an OECD member in the future around our Council table. In closing, in the context of all the challenges we're facing today over the short, medium and long term, the world needs more international cooperation, not less. We need more multilateralism, not less. We need countries and international organizations from around the world working together to find the best possible solutions to the evolving challenges of our time. The OECD, as always, stands ready to be an active and constructive partner in this process. My very best wishes for a positive, productive, forward-looking and outcomes-focused forum as you consider how best to find the pathway to a more prosperous, sustainable, inclusive and resilient future. Thank you.
We wish to thank Secretary General Corman for his message and words of support. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome and invite the participants of our Setting the Scene panel discussion titled Navigating the Global Reshuffle. I hereby welcome and invite the Speaker of the Croatian Parliament, Mr. Gordan Jandrokovic, to take the floor. And a round of applause, please. Let us also welcome the Prime Minister of Croatia, Mr. Andrej Plenković. We are pleased that the Secretary General of the Council of Europe, Ms. Marija Pejčinović-Burić, will be with us today. I also welcome and invite to join us the Vice President of the Council of Ministers and Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Italy, Mr. Antonio Tajani. I invite the High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policies and Vice President of the European Commission, Mr. Josep Borrell, to take the floor. And I now invite Chief of Staff to the Minister of Foreign and European Affairs of Croatia, Ms. Lara Romano, to moderate this discussion.
Welcome. Let me just concentrate on the first question immediately. Mr. High Representative, you coined the phrase Europe needs to learn to speak the language of power. How is that going?
Quite well. Not as well as needed, but I think that we have understood that we are not a military union, we are not a military alliance, so we cannot expect to be using the military power and invading someone. But we are not an NGO. We are not just someone that preaches good behavior, respect to the rule of law, and trade. And for years we have been building our union with the idea of rejection of power. We used power so much in the past that we rejected the idea of using power, and instead of that, we trade and we send the message that the people have to behave according with the rule of law. But that's not enough, because in the world in which we are living, Many people don't care about the rules, and many people are ready to use coercion and to use military force, and Ukraine is the last case. And yes, we have been doing things that shows that we have power. The power, for example, of rejecting our energy dependency from Russia. For years we said interdependency is good. I buy your goods, you get my money, I get your gas. A win-win. But this dependency has become dangerous. And the idea of cutting this dependency, 40% of dependency on gas, it's a show of power. We will do something else. We have been creating mechanisms in order to fight against disinformation. And there is a lot of work to be done. We have been thinking on our putting together our military capacities through the strategic compass. But a lot remains to be done. And we have taken sanctions, restrictive measures. The word sanction doesn't exist in the treaty. But restrictive measures against Russia, the biggest that one could have imagined, much more than when Crimea. And we have to continue using these tools. We have to continue showing to the counterparts in the world that yes, we can act, we can take measures against you. The war in Crimea also showed for us the possibility of providing lethal arms to a country at war. Has never done. And when I proposed to do it, people told me, are you crazy? Are we going to be involved in a war? Involved in a war? What does it mean to be involved in a war? We are not going to be part of the war, but we are going to send arms to someone to defend. This is a structural change on what the European Union is and what the European Union has to be if we want to survive in a world of power politics. Because like it or not, we are living in a world of power politics. And then the second big question for us is how do we balance our power in front of China? This is something in which the European Union will show what kind of geopolitical power it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. High Representative. An integrated security approach, that's what we need, right? And that's what we are going to work towards. Mr. Prime Minister Andrej Plenković, how has Croatia been navigating in today's changed geopolitical landscape?
First of all, great to be here. The forum looks even better from this perspective, and my greetings to the mayor of Dubrovnik and the prefect of Dubrovnik-Neretva County. We are no stranger to change as a country. Everything that has been happening with Croatia for the last 3 decades was connected through change, transformation, agility, adaptation, work for solutions in multiple crises that we have gone through. I think in terms of political approach, we have been very principled. The position of Croatian government, parliamentary majority was so clear in terms of condemning Russia as an aggressor against Ukraine and extending full solidarity and support to Ukraine as a victim. And this was the key principal position in terms of political approach of Croatia to the current context. When it comes to the repercussions on our way of life, on our economy, on our social situation, we had one very clear objective, to act decisively and swiftly in order to ensure and maintain the social cohesion of the society and by all means avoid the social fracture. This was the overarching task of our policy, and we have managed to do that so far. When it comes to cooperation with our partners and friends, not only that we have worked together in the course of the crisis when it came to issues of energy security, capping the prices of gas, or supporting each other in the times of the COVID crisis, we have actually used well our strengthened international position. This is the main line of the political framework that I've been promoting, which is called modern sovereignism, which enables Croatia, with its better international standing, to fulfill its key national tasks. And not only that we have navigated well through crisis, I believe, but we have also attained our strategic foreign policy objectives. And these are the objectives of two deeper integrations that occurred on the 1st of January, Schengen area and the Eurozone, as Minister has said at the opening of this conference, which have provided us a completely new quality. We were just commenting, Gordon and myself, as some sort of relative veterans to this forum and to Croatia's foreign policy. How did we manage to arrive at the point that one of the two introductory speeches to the conference bears the logo of the OECD behind? That means that we have passed such a long way that the only maintaining organization to accede to is the one that focuses on those who are well organized, based the rule of law, market economy, and have the best policies for their citizens. So I think it was a period of finding solutions and bringing Croatia to the global family, I would say, that where people live the best, and this is what we have been trying to do.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. There are many references pointing to the relevance of Croatia's experience for Ukraine, from coping with external aggression, prospects of reintegration to post-war reconstruction. You have been very vocal on the support of Croatia's support to Ukraine. What are the main lessons Croatia can share, and how best can Croatia support Ukraine going forward, Mr. Prime Minister?
When it comes to Ukraine, I think that unfortunate experience of Croatia of having been a country that was a victim to, at the time, greater Serbian policy of Milosevic's regime, and having passed through the 7 years of the occupied territories, somewhere between the quarter and a third of our territory occupied, we have been for a very long time advocating in various fora since 2013-14, the first part of this aggressive policy of Russia against Ukraine, that the experience of Croatia, which was in particular relevant when it comes to the process of the peaceful reintegration of the Croatian Danubian area, that is the eastern Slavonia part of our territory, could have been extremely helpful for both Donetsk and Luhansk region. Unfortunately, the Minsk agreements were not implemented, because if you would take away the names of the territories and countries, similarities are stunning when you read those documents of 9 years ago. Today, I think we can help in many ways, and this is what we are trying to do, trying to provide Ukraine with the assistance where we have a little bit unfortunate experience of good knowledge. One is demining, something that has burdened Croatia and our farmers and everybody who lives in the areas that were previously occupied, where we intend to finish, Minister Božinović is here, the demining of Croatia in 2026. To give you an idea, that is literally 35 years after the start of the war. So 35 years for the process of demining of a territory which is incomparably smaller than Ukrainian territory, which is under mines. Second niche where we are providing them assistance is also unfortunate, and that is our experience regarding the accountability and the processing of war crimes. We just held Mr. Kostin and the Minister of Justice of Ukraine in Croatia last week. When I came back from the European Council, they had a workshop here for 3 days with our specialized prosecutors for prosecuting the war crimes, and the incredible experience that we have accumulated is now being offered to Ukraine, which is, as you have seen, besides the defense of the territory, has been extremely proactive in strengthening, I would say, the international justice, both regarding the aggression and regarding the accountability for the war crimes, where the steps that ICC has taken, especially vis-à-vis the Russia's president, are in view of many a critical game changer in terms of the end game, which we are all going to see in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Signor Vicepresidente, how do you see the situation evolving and the Italian role in supporting Ukraine? What are the top priorities of the Italian government when it comes to Ukraine?
First of all, allow me to thank the Prime Minister Plenković for inviting me in this beautiful town. I want to thank also the Minister of Foreign Affairs. This invitation is a clear message to Italy for strengthening the cooperation between Croatia and Italy. Thank you very, very, very much. I am very happy for this. Italy, I want to be very clear. Italy is working hard for supporting Ukraine against Russian invasion. The Italian government is helping Ukraine in many, many sectors, not only at military level, but also for supporting the civil population, through goods, electric goods, more or less 100 tons of electric goods because the problem is the electricity in many, many Ukrainian towns. Then we are supporting in order for the reconstruction. In Rome we organized a very important event with more or less 1,000 companies, Italians and Ukrainians, for the reconstruction of Ukraine. And we want to play a role also for the coordination of the humanitarian aids for the reconstructions in the next years. We will host in Italy in 2025 the big event, as more or less the same, organized by the United Kingdom 3 weeks ago. At political level, we need to work for the freedom of Ukraine. But we want to achieve peace. But peace with justice. Justice is freedom of Ukraine, no doubt. For this, we support every initiative in favor of peace. We agree with the proposal of Zelensky. We are working with NATO and European Union all together. Second point, there are 3 concrete points. First of all, to have a free zone around Zaporizhzhia. We need a strong action for the freedom of the children, Ukrainian children living in Russia. Now, third point is the green corridor for grain to Africa. We need to be very clear with the Russians. To stop this agreement is a disaster for Africa, for stability of Africa. For this, I am very happy also for the strong action by Mr. Erdogan. Yesterday, very good meeting between Zelensky and Erdogan, probably on this. This is another point. Finally, we support also the action of China, but in favor of Ukraine. And then also the ONLC is working well also for the prisoners. I think it's a good idea to open the dialogue between Russians and Ukraine on the prisoners. Step by step, we want to achieve peace. We are not in war against Russia. We are strongly engaged in defense of Ukraine.
Grazie mille. The next question is for the Speaker of the Croatian Parliament. We will examine a little bit parliamentary dimension of when it comes to Ukraine. So, Mr. Jandrokovic, what are some ways in which the global parliamentary community contributes more when it comes to Ukraine? Can you comment on what the global parliamentary community is preoccupied with? What dominates the high-level discussions?
Thank you. First of all, it is a great pleasure to talk on behalf of Parliament, on behalf of parliamentarians, especially when I share the floor with 2 former presidents of European Parliament, Mr. Tajani and Mr. Borrell. But we share the same concerns as our governments. Ukraine is the top of our agenda. And regularly we have our parliamentary meetings on the level of speakers of the parliaments. For example, I participated 4 times in a very important conference in the last 9 months. First one was first parliamentary summit of Crimea platform, which took place in Zagreb in October last year. The goal of this conference was to support Ukraine from the level of parliaments, and it was a huge success, not only for Croatia, for Croatian Parliament. Together, we organized this conference together with Verkhovna Rada, but it is a success for all partners, allies, and countries which support Ukraine. We reached final declaration and with 3 main messages. First, we strongly condemn Russian aggression on Ukraine. Then express solidarity with Ukrainian people and support territorial integrity, sovereignty and independence of Ukraine. And third, it is also very important, we support and push our governments to continue with help and support for Ukraine, militarily, humanitarian aid, political aid, diplomatic aid. And we reach consensus among almost 50 parliaments around the globe. Then we had meetings in Prague, in Czech Republic. It was meeting of EU speakers. Then in Vilnius last month, it was NATO member speakers. And very interesting conference in the beautiful city of León in Spain about crisis of democracy and parliamentarism in new circumstances. Of course, Ukraine was at the top of our priority, but we also touch other important issues, other challenges and threats for global, for world. We touch also climate change, consequences of COVID-19, problems with artificial intelligence, with fake news and all other important threats, which is big challenges for new world.
Thank you, Mr. Androkovich. Madam Secretary General, what are the immediate priorities for the Council of Europe in light of this global reshuffle? How is your organization responding to the challenge?
Before answering your question, can I just take off my hat of the Secretary General of the Council of Europe and just remember that I was among those who were here in 2006 when this forum started. But what came up to my mind, both listening to Dmytro Kuleba and to Mr. Corman on the first edition of this conference, was that actually after the Dubrovnik Forum back in 2006, I was sent as an envoy to European Yalta strategy to Ukraine. So it's really telling and symbolic that we are now, that Ukraine is focused on our discussion. So coming back to your question, indeed, I think what Foreign Minister Kuleba was telling, what Ukraine does at the moment, is very much responding in one part, which is accountability, what we do for Ukraine. But before starting with that, let me just say one sentence on why we are where we are and why we are having now this discussion on reshuffling and changing how to respond to these tremendous changes in the global world of geopolitics. Russian Federation was a member of the Council of Europe, the biggest member, and actually the fact that it invaded Ukraine for the second time, this time for fully fledged illegal aggression, was immediately triggered immediate reaction on the Council of Europe side, which was immediately, really, literally, the next day, suspending Russia from the organization, and in less than 3 weeks, excluding Russia. And so far, we are the only international organization which was very bold in action and very clear in responding to our blatant breach of international law, of the statute and values of the Council of Europe. So, of course, with that, only on the level of the organization, if you don't take a bigger picture, it was a big event that we had to react. And actually, when we were thinking what we could do immediately for Ukraine, it came up as accountability. So we started with assisting the then Prosecutor General, really as the beginning of March 2022. We continue to do so, but in the meantime, we were continuing working on accountability path. We thought, what Council of Europe, as the organization that protects human rights, democracy, and rule of law, would be best at to offer to assist Ukraine, was to set up the register of damage, to register the claims of all the damage, moral or physical, that has been done to civilians. So actually, I can say that in less than 1 year, we already had a meeting of the parties, that we have at this moment 42 members of the register, including all G7 members and European Union as a member. And I think the number is only to grow. But this was, and it's also the first, and for this, the first follow-up of the UN resolution from November 14 for setting up the international instruments to hold Russia accountable legally for what they are doing. So we are there. We are working on the register. It will be set up in The Hague, and only in a few days' time I will sign the seat agreement with the Hague, and also it will have an antenna in Kiev. So this is a really clear answer to Russia that there will be no one single crime that they have committed, that it will be not brought before justice, and that we are not only talking about, but we are doing it. And with the register, we really start with that. So this is when it comes to the accountability, which is of utmost importance, because if we want a sustainable peace for Ukraine, and I think we all want that, but just and sustainable, we have to have accountability. But broader than that, for Ukraine, we work on through an action plan on resilience, recovery, and reconstruction. And I have to say that really our Ukrainian friends and colleagues are really formidable in what they are doing. They are really fighting a big enemy on the front, but at the same time, Rada is continue working, and they are continue to working with their national institutions, preparing for the peace. So we are helping on that way as well, through our reform of the justice, combating corruption, working on the economic crime side, but also working with youth, with the local government, and so on. So we believe that our prime responsibility at this moment is to assist our member state Ukraine in the all best way we can, from the point of view what this organization can offer. We are doing it, and as some others, we are always saying we will really continue to work with Ukraine hand in hand until it's necessary during the wartime, but even more once the war stops, and we hope really that will be rather sooner than later.
Thank you. Strong messages, joint messages for Ukraine, resilience, recovery, reconstruction, call for accountability. These are strong messages from the international community, and we are continuing to work on that. Mr. Borrell, media is reporting that we are witnessing a future-defining trade war. Some say that Beijing is giving Europe a yellow card when it comes to exports of critical raw materials. Do you see it as a Chinese response to the recently presented European economic security strategy?
Well, as I said, our relationship with China will mark what the European Union is going to be. It is one of the most important geopolitical challenge. But China is not Russia. Don't put both on the same level. And we have to diminish our dependencies on China as we have done with Russia on the energy side. But we have to avoid to divide the world into different ecosystems, divided and confronted. And on one side, we have to be precautionary, because we have in China today a bigger dependency on the digital side that we had with Russia on the hydrocarbon side. And this is something that has to be reviewed. But on the other side, I think that we have to offer China a dialogue in order to give China some assurances, in order to get back also some commitments from their side. For example, we don't have, I think, to oppose the rise of China, as a power. Because it will be a power. It is already a power. The important thing is how China is going to use its power. And this requires a much more sophisticated approach than just an assertive one. And our economic security depends certainly on being sure that we cannot come into a situation in which we lack some critical material. I think that the time of la mondialisation heureuse is over, and now security is taking an important role. Until now we were saying just in time in order to avoid having stocks, because stocks are costly, and now we have entered in the era of just in case. Just in case means precautionary, don't have too strong dependencies. And certainly China can retaliate a lot. When we say about de-risking, well, China can de-risk also toward us. Our relationship with China is too complex in order to be summarized in a catchy sentence. Not decoupling, de-risking. That doesn't mean, because de-risking comes with risk also. And it has to be done in an intelligent manner, knowing that it will take years and it will come with risk. That being said, it's clear that we have to be not naive. China is not going to evolve towards a multi-party democratic systems as someone believed when China became member of the World Trade Organization. China is a completely different political system. It's a completely different economic system, and it will remain the way it is. And we have to navigate in this global reshuffle in which in some years from now China will be over the US in economic terms and becoming a big military power. And our relationship with China has to be built on the way that we combine the necessary, let's say, precautionary approach, not being dependent, critically, dangerously dependent, and on the other hand, to understand that it's a fact of life that China will continue having a strong influence in the world, and that we have to be more assertive in order to counterbalance this influence. I'm coming from an African country. I was traveling the whole night to have the pleasure to be here with you. This country has oil. Who is exploiting the oil? China. Who built the 2,000 kilometers pipeline to take this oil to the sea? China. Why not us? I'm coming from Latin America, in the triangle of a lithium triangle. All the firms who are exploiting the lithium there are Chinese. Why not us? Who prevents us from doing that? 80% of the critical raw materials were needed for the digital transformation. 80% are being built, processed, not exploited, but processed in China. Why not us? So let's do it. De-risking is our homework. We don't have to negotiate it with China. It's just a matter of taking full conscience of who we are, where we are, and what do we have to do. So let's do it.
Thank you, Mr. Borrell. Let's bring this just-in-case scenario closer to our region, closer to our borders. And in that sense, Mr. Vice President, your presence here today is a much welcome sign of a renewed focus on the Mediterranean, Adriatic, and Balkan regions. What are the lines of action of the Italian government, taking into account that both the Balkan region and the Mediterranean area have been impacted by the effects of the Russian aggression?
Thank you for the question. For the Italian government, the Western Balkans are a priority. Why? Because the Western Balkans are Europe. We are working well with every country. We are starting with the countries members of the European Union. On Monday, Italy will organize a trilateral meeting in Ancona with your Minister for Foreign Affairs, the Minister for Slovenia, but we will invite also the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Austrian Minister for Foreign Affairs. For this, we want to have a common strategy for more Europe in the Western Balkans. I agree with Mr. Borrell. We need less Russia, less China, and more Europe in the Western Balkans. For this, talking on Ukraine, we will support, of course, the full membership of Ukraine, the European Union. But at the same time, we want full member of the European Union, also the other countries of the Western Balkans. This is our engagement. I underlined this point also 3 weeks ago in London. Ukraine, yes, but also the Western Balkans countries. Italy is working hard for the stability of the regions. The Italian soldiers working in Bosnia and Herzegovina, working close to the borders between Kosovo and Serbia, are working for peace. The Italian soldiers of Guardia di Finanza in Albania, they are working against human traffickers, against drug traffickers, in strict cooperation with the Albanian police. This is the Italian engagement. Why we want stability? Of course, because the Western Balkans are Europe, but there is another problem: illegal immigration. For Italy, there are unfortunately two corridors: Mediterranean corridor, and the second corridor is the Western Balkan corridor. For this, we need to work all together against the human traffickers, because they are the same organization of the drug traffickers, weapons traffickers. They are more or less the same organization. For us, it's a danger because the border in Friuli, Venezia, Giulia, every day there are problems in this border for illegal immigrants coming from the south of Europe, from Turkey, from Syria. This is a big problem. But the only one solution is to work as Europeans all together against illegal immigration. We are in favor of legal migrants, but we need to stop the traffickers. It's the only one solution for Italy is to work all together through good action in Africa. I believe in a European Marshall Plan for growth of Africa, but at the same time, we need to stop the human traffickers all together. We need an European strategy. Italy alone, Croatia alone, it's impossible to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. We hear loud and clear, and it's an issue of utmost importance even for us. Mr. Prime Minister, the one area which has also been impacted by the Russian aggression is the enlargement of the EU. What is the way forward for the Western Balkan countries and the Eastern partners, Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia?
Well, indeed, the first ramifications of what Russia has done against Ukraine was very plastic in terms of status at the Council of Europe. Russia is not anymore part of the Council of Europe. It was one of our elements in Reykjavik at the summit after more than 20 years. And Ukraine has been granted a candidate status. So institutional, complete change. The similar thing will happen now in Vilnius when Ukraine will be upgraded to the level of the NATO-Ukraine Council rather than the lower status of the Commission before, and also a more concrete language about the future, something that Mitra was saying at the beginning of the conference. Let alone that Moldova and Georgia have also been granted a candidate status with a slight nuances, but these are huge changes. A few years ago, within the European Union, both institutions and member states, to even think that the neighborhood countries may get the same type of language and perspective as those who were within the enlargement policy was unthinkable. Now they're all there, even pushing the countries of the Western Balkans to go faster. Croatia was saying for many years to our partners within the European Union, if we are not engaged enough in the region of Southeast Europe, other big players will be and are engaged. And this has finally changed, I would say, somewhere in 2018 when Bulgaria had, Maria is here, chairmanship or presidency of the Council. and Boyko Borisov organized the summit in Sofia after 15 years after Thessaloniki. We have finally understood, look, there are countries who are surrounded by the European Union member states. They, in principle, would all like to join. Maybe it's a good idea that we have a systematic dialogue, something we were saying for many, many years because the whole process started in Zagreb. And since then, we are now meeting basically every year. And the countries have gained a chance to accelerate their process if they, of course, perform at the reform, at the deeds part of the exercise. And here it's good, literally, that all the Quint members are here, the ones that are discussing the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina on a daily basis, that are following the situation in Kosovo, that are trying to help to address the remaining issues between Bulgaria and Macedonia, or North Macedonia, in order to enable the process for this country to go forward. I think we should make a push, because now it's the moment, it's the unique opportunity for all of our neighbors to make step forward. I believe that the fact that the mood has changed, not that the arms are again wide open as they were 30 years ago towards the countries of Central and Eastern Europe, but I think despite the negative consequences of the migratory movements and the crisis that has changed completely the political mood in the old member states, if there is one core issue that will be a signal of reservedness towards the enlargement, is the consequences of migration. Antonio was referring to it now. We saw it during our Schengen negotiations. We had to literally navigate through several needles' eyes in order to attain this objective, and we have seen the news on the debate in the Netherlands regarding the migratory policy. So we'll have to take this issue very, very seriously. And I have to praise here my colleague Kyriakos Mitsotakis, who after bad policies of Tsipras and Syriza has actually made huge progress on securing the Greek-Turkish border. That has actually stopped by 98% the migration at the Eastern Mediterranean, Western Balkans route. Had this not been done, we would all be in a very different situation, literally, compared to 2015-16 crisis. So the moment is now. We are here to push and offer all of our experience and knowledge to our friends.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Indeed, the political mood is constantly changing, and it is important to feel the pulse of the people, of our citizens. Mr. Androkovic, from the parliamentary perspective, can you speak about some specific dangers you have identified for our citizens whom you represent? What answers can be offered from the parliamentary and interparliamentary level?
The world is changing dramatically, Europe particularly, and we all face consequences of pandemic of COVID-19 and also Russian aggression against Ukraine. From my point of view, Europe must or needs develop more strategic autonomy and resilience to critical sectors like food, health, energy, defense, security. But at the same time, we should protect our democracy and our values. And maybe it is crucial to explain our people how difficult was to build our societies and our states based on these values: peace, freedom, democracy, rule of law, protection of human rights. It is not taken us for granted. Generations of politicians fight to build our societies and this spirit of Europe. And now we all, I talk with a lot of colleagues of mine, speakers of parliament, and we share this very similar or same concerns. First, there is threats, direct threats to our citizens, to our democratic institutions, and to our values. And we see information manipulation. We see foreign interference in our elections. We see fake news, hybrid and cyber activities. We also see populism, extremism, radicalism from both sides of political spectrum, from the left and from the right. And we see irresponsible politicians who offer shallow criticism, not argument, but they offer our people a solution which is not real. And now, as a responsible politician, we should respond and try to find a way how to explain our people what is going on. And there is no clear recipe what we should do, because the world is new, with new technologies, with internet, social media, and it demands from us to adjust and to offer new solutions. I can see from the position of the politician to offer responsible, achievable and sustainable policies, to communicate with our people openly, try to explain. At the same time, we should also focus on our citizens and try to develop mechanisms that provide more information, transparency and integrity, and also helping them to strengthen media and digital literacy. It's not easy, but this is new world, new challenges, and it is our duty to improve ourselves and to adjust to these new challenges.
Indeed, adjustment. It's a key word here. And in that context, Madam Secretary General, how do you see the Council of Europe in the longer term? Will the Council of Europe recalibrate its priorities and its work in light of these challenges mentioned?
Thank you very much. I'm very grateful to the Speaker of the Parliament to have spoken on actually the basic reasons why the Council of Europe exists. At the establishment of the Council of Europe back in 1949 in St. James's Palace in London, the key words were, we are establishing the Council of Peace, and all we hope is to have hope and reason. And I was struck 3 weeks ago in London, where I was at the same Ukraine conference in London, to hear that you can easily use that at this stage where Europe is now. And I think the fact that it is so, it shows that we need the Council of Europe. Prime Minister Plenković was right to mention the Reykjavik summit. Actually, one of the reasons why I pushed for more than a year to have a summit after 18 years, the last one before Reykjavik was back in 2007 in Warsaw, was exactly to address these old and new challenges. Old are some that are persistent, and some of them were mentioned already. So I issue every 2 years an annual report on human rights, democracy, and rule of law. And actually, it's a health check of democracy, rule of law, and human rights across 46 member states. And if there are few things that come out and that were predating the pandemic, which exacerbated the problems, which predated also the war in Ukraine, are, and I mentioned just a few, threat to journalism and journalists, intimidation, sometimes even murders of journalists, shrinking of the civic space, and hate speech. And it's difficult to say which one is more important. There are other problems, but these were very important. So for the Council of Europe, it was very crucial at this moment to say what we want. Next year we are celebrating the 75th anniversary of the Council of Europe. Leaders were clear in Reykjavik that we need stronger Council of Europe with more empowered, and that it has to focus on certainly implementation of the Convention on Human Rights, and that basically covers its Magna Carta, I would say, of the Council of Europe. It embodies all what is important for today's peace in Europe: fundamental freedoms, civil liberties, but also the things like right to life, right to association, right to freedom of expression, right to religion and belief. Expression of the religion and belief and all that. So from our point of view, to prevent the next Russia, because the war in Ukraine was prepared long ago by Russia. It only erupted last year, but actually it was the rise of extreme nationalism, extreme populism, and complete pivot away from the values and standards of the Council of Europe. This is what led us to the war in Central of Europe. So what we need is to work and reaffirm the standards and values which are very clear. When asked how do we do that? Well, the answer is pretty simple, but pretty challenging as well. We need political will. This is all what we need, and translate goodwill to preserve democracy, rule of law, and human rights in real everyday path. And I think if there is one message that holds not only for Europe but for the whole world, we should never ever take anything for granted. We try to believe that we reached, and we have reached, we can be very proud of Europe, we reached a level of developments in civil liberties which are unprecedented elsewhere. We have the Convention on Human Rights, we have European Social Charter, we have all the rights there, and we are working to implement them. But what we have to do is to walk the talk, to do every day, whatever we can, parliaments, governments, civil society, everyone, including international organizations, to make that happen. So this is the way how the Council of Europe is in the future, and challenging the new and approaching new challenges. The new challenges are artificial intelligence and human rights, not really new, but a new way of looking at environment and human rights. So we are already working on new conventions in these areas. So we are trying to solve old problems, but also to try to tackle the best possible way the new ones.
Thank you, Madam Secretary General. Our time is running out. Slowly but surely, therefore, political will, that's the soundbite that we want to conclude with. I will ask you the final question for all discussants, and I do need flash answers from you all. The EU and the world have been faced with multitude of crises in the last decade or even longer. How has this poly-crisis affected governance and impacted your work as leaders? How do we jointly avoid backsliding of democracy and easy fixes of populism? How can we bring this ship navigating the global reshuffle to a safe harbor? Mr. Jandrokovic, please.
You ask for flash answer.
Yes, possibly.
It is really impossible. But as I said, and also Madam Pejčinović and all my colleagues, we need to work very hardly, to be responsible, to be serious. We have so many challenges. I don't remember during my political career that we have so many different areas in which we have threats. There is no simple answer. We should continue in the same spirit, together. We should show solidarity to each other, unity, also provide help to our friends in Ukraine, educate new generation to understand the world, to understand the values which is important for a normal, comfortable life which we have in Europe, and work. This is the only way.
Thank you, Madam Secretary General.
Well, I think what I said to the previous answers is answer to that, but in a nutshell, I would say that, there were several crises. There was the financial crisis of 2008. There was a pandemic. There is a war of aggression against Ukraine. And in all that, everyone, including the international organizations, needed to adjust. We did so. For instance, the best example is how we adjust quickly. No one ever thought or expected pandemic to happen. And then when it happened, we all had to ask ourselves how to survive, how to physically survive, how to keep health and human lives there, but also how to reshuffle our work. Our answer was a toolkit for the governments, how to navigate these very, very difficult times, how to save lives, which is also one of the fundamental human rights, but also how to not to undermine all the rights that we have acquired. So toolkit was an answer that the organization has given to member states already by the beginning of April 2000. So I think adjusting, listening carefully, and adjusting to the situation as we adjusted to the abruption of war of aggression on the 24th February last year, immediate suspension. So I think we need to take decisions much quicker than it was the case before, and we need to adjust. And there is a Croat poem saying, only the change is constant. And I think this is the motto for this world. Only the change is constant, we have to adjust.
Thank you. Mr. Borrell.
Well, your question is impossible to answer in few words. But look, my job is called foreign and security policy. And before the war in Ukraine and before the pandemic, the word security was playing a secondary role. It was about foreign policy. More and more is about security, because we live in a dangerous world. And don't give for granted that we Europeans, we could survive in this world without more unity, because each one of us is too small to face the challenges of this world. We have to be more united, because this world will be dominated by the confrontation between China and the US, certainly, but also by a messy multipolarity of many other countries emerging and willing to be heard, willing to be part of the solution, willing to be part of the international institutions that were forged in 1945. After the Second World War, when some of these countries, they don't even existed. China didn't exist in 1945. It didn't exist the way it is today. But look, there are many who want to take part of the new world order. And we have to take that into account. We Europeans, we are the best combination of political freedom, economic prosperity, and social cohesion. But if we want this combination of good things that we can offer to our citizens, political freedom, economic prosperity, and social cohesion, we have to be more united to take decisions quicker and to take into account the problems of the rest of the world. To take into account their problems, because sometimes they believe that when we have a problem, this is a global problem. But when they have a problem, it is something different. We have to avoid double standards. We have to avoid the feeling that yes, but not. And we have to engage much more with the root problems of the causes that affect us. Migration is a typical example. Migration will not be solved just by putting walls in our borders. Migration will only be solved if we solve the root causes of it. And if you travel through Africa, then you will understand which are the root causes. So more unity, less preaching, and most engaging.
Thank you. Signor Vicepresidente.
Today the confrontation is between democracy and totalitarianism. This is the new battle for the future. Also after the war in Ukraine, we will have China and Russia. In the West, Europe, of course, America. But if we want to strengthen stability, peace and security, as Mr. Borrell said, we need to change also our policy. We need to look at Africa and at South America. To live in Chinese and Russian hands, Wagner and Chinese in Africa, but South America is the same. For this, we need to look at these two continents with different ideas. We need to look at these countries not with our glasses, but with the African glasses, with the South American glasses. They want to talk with us, but if we are not strongly engaged in this country, they will be against us, under Chinese control. In 2050, we will have between 2.5 billion and 3 billion people living in Africa. What we want to do in this continent? We want to organize a strong friendship with this continent or not? Look at Tunisia, Libya. They are living difficult moments because the immigration, they're pushing climate change, health problems, terrorism, piracy. There are a lot of problems. It's our interest to look at Africa, to look at South America. But we need a strategy. We need investment. We need a Marshall Plan for Africa, for helping growth, to organize joint ventures, also for the transformations of the raw materials in this continent, against colonization. It's only for growth. And we need to do the same in South America. I agree with Mr. Borrell. For this is the future of Europe and the G7. Also in the Indo-Pacific region, we need to work for more democracy. We need to strengthen, for example, our friendship with India. This is crucial for us. If we want to, this is because India is a democracy. China is not a democracy. Of course, we need to talk with China, but we need to have a model of life, democratic model of life. And also, please allow me to conclude on this. We need to protect our European values, because to live our European values is a big mistake. Our identity is very clear. For this, I think it's important also for paving a good future for us. To protect our identity is also to open the door. Without identity, it's difficult to open the door of the dialogue. And the dialogue is the dialogue with Africa, with South America. Thank you.
Thank you. Final thoughts, Mr. Prime Minister.
Well, I think there is no really an easy answer to your question, but it's true. We are all navigating the global shuffle, and I think there are several elements we need to take into account. The one which I wanted to say was so well articulated by Antonio, and that is the competition between democracies and the authoritarian regimes. This is the big framework for the global game that we are all living at the moment. The solution, the way I see it, is that we must strengthen the respect of international law. This is essential for the success of finding solutions and difficulties for the global governance. The international law is the only reliable element that we can think about. Secondly, we should diminish in the West dependencies, whether it's energy or raw materials or anything else that can make us weaker. The third essential political element. In past decades, there was always the narrative that the West was using various soft ways of changing regimes and turning authoritarian regimes into democracies. What we are witnessing now is actually the impact of the authoritarian regime on our own democracies by weakening them and threatening the democratic processes. And basically, when you look at democratic countries and those who have more stable perspective of ruling for 10, 15, 20, 30 years in the conflictual context, of course, the one who is longer in power is stronger. And this is the difficulty of the task ahead of us. And I think, as Josep has said, we have to strengthen the security and defense part. We are actually, again, in the completely new cycle of investment into defense, something that many European countries have almost forgotten about. When you look at the numbers, and it's good to look at the numbers once in a while, of the funds allocated in some member states of NATO, the EU, for defense, it was going down. And basically now you see that there is a clear raising of the awareness that we need to invest more in defense. The migratory issue, if it comes back again in big context as it was 7-8 years ago, I think it will again have devastating impact on the political situation across Europe, and we need to be really very well prepared for that. And the only solution for that is strengthening of the external border and streamlining of all of our external policies, trying to address the issue where the problem actually starts. So no easy answer, but the global situation in the next decades is far more complex than any of the strategic documents had anticipated. I will always just say that the moment when Russia invades Ukraine in February last year, can we remember the context? United States completely focused on its relationship vis-à-vis China. Change of government or chancellor in Germany after 16 years, a new government, new chancellor, United Kingdom recovering from a horrible mistake of Brexit and leaving the European Union, France entangled into the presidential parliamentary campaign and the presidency of the Council of the European Union. Everybody was somewhere else. And as soon as the Winter Olympics truce was over, the invasion started. As if it was a copy-paste 2008 Georgia situation and the French presidency again at the same time. So, and partnership forever in Beijing with Xi just before that. So we have to be very careful. Those who are at ease in terms of the length of their mandate, they have more time to plan and act. Those who fight for the political survival have a very different agenda and a lot of checks and balances and control. So democracies need to be stronger in order to fight this global game in a successful manner.
Thank you very much. Caution on one hand, yet there is room for optimism. On that note, we can conclude this panel. Thank you all for participating.
We thank once again